My name is Claire Whitman. I'm 36 years old, and until last fall, I genuinely believed that if you worked hard enough, stayed loyal enough, and sacrificed quietly, your family would never be the ones to hurt you the most. I was wrong. I didn't find out my family business was sold through a meeting. I didn't hear it from a lawyer. I didn't even hear it from my brother. I found out while sitting in a hospital hallway, staring at a flickering vending machine, waiting for a doctor to tell me whether my mother was going to be okay. That was the moment my phone buzzed. A notification, a bank alert, a wire transfer confirmation I wasn't supposed to see. My brother had signed the deal. He had sold the company our father built, and he did it while I was holding my mother's hand in an ER bed. What shocked me wasn't just the sale, it was the timing, the precision of it, the way it felt planned, like he knew exactly when I wouldn't be looking. I remember thinking, this can't be real. Families don't do this to each other. Not when someone's sick, not when you've been carrying the weight together for years. Before I go any further, let me ask you something. If you've ever been betrayed by someone who shared your last name, if you've ever realized too late that loyalty only flowed one direction, leave a comment and say, I see you. And if you want real stories about family betrayal, power, and choosing yourself without turning bitter, subscribe, because what comes next isn't easy to hear, but it's real. I had spent years convincing myself that stability meant safety, that keeping things running smoothly meant I was protected. I was the one who showed up early and left late, the one who handled payroll, vendors, angry clients, broken trucks, the one who stepped in when my brother disappeared for meetings that somehow always ended at bars. I thought that made me indispensable. I thought that made me safe. Instead, it made me useful. Sitting there in that hospital hallway, I realized something terrifying. The deal didn't just happen while I was distracted. It happened because I was distracted. And in that moment, before the anger, before the grief, before the fallout, I understood one thing with absolute clarity. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a mistake. This was a betrayal that had been waiting for the perfect moment to land. To understand why that moment hurt so much, you have to understand what the business actually was to me. It wasn't just a company, it was my father's hands, cracked and permanently stained with grease. It was the sound of forklifts at 6 in the morning. It was a promise he made when we were kids that if we took care of it, it would take care of us. After my dad passed, everyone assumed my brother Daniel would take over. He had the confidence, the voice, the ability to walk into a room and make people feel like something important was about to happen. I had something else. I had follow-through. I was the one who stayed late when drivers quit without notice, the one who learned payroll software because we couldn't afford another hire, the one who answered client emails at midnight because relationships matter even when Daniel was unreachable. He used to joke about it. You're the backbone, Claire, he'd say. You keep the lights on. I took that as a compliment. I told myself it was fine that my name wasn't on the trucks, fine that clients asked for him even though I did the work, fine that when things went right, he took the credit, and when things went wrong, I took the calls. That's what family does, right? You don't keep score. You don't demand recognition. You just show up. When our mom's health started declining, I showed up even more. I handled her insurance paperwork between meetings. I took calls from doctors in stairwells. I covered Daniel's responsibilities without saying anything because he was stressed. I told myself it was temporary, that once things settled down, we'd rebalance. But balance is a word people use when they don't want to admit someone is carrying more than their share. There were nights I slept on the office couch. Mornings I opened the warehouse alone because no one else had arrived yet. Weekends that disappeared into spreadsheets and damage reports. And I never complained because deep down, I believed something simple and dangerous. If I held everything together long enough, no one would dare pull it apart behind my back. I believed loyalty would be reciprocated, that sacrifice would be respected, that being reliable made me untouchable. Sitting in that hospital hallway, staring at my phone, I realized how wrong I'd been. All that endurance hadn't protected me. It had just made it easier for someone else to decide, quietly, that I didn't need to be consulted at all. I didn't confront Daniel right away, not because I was afraid, but because I needed to be sure I wasn't imagining things. I needed facts, proof, something solid enough that even family excuses couldn't soften it. So after the doctor finally said my mom was stable, I stepped outside the hospital and made a call. It wasn't to my brother, it was to the company's attorney. The silence on the other end lasted just a little too long. Yes, he finally said. The documents were signed yesterday afternoon. Yesterday, while I was in the ER, while I was texting Daniel updates about our mother, while I was telling him she was scared. And my name? I asked. Another pause. You're not listed as a signatory, he said carefully. Daniel amended the operating agreement last year. That was the moment the air left my lungs. Last year. Which meant this wasn't a decision made under pressure. This wasn't panic. This wasn't grief or stress or confusion. This was preparation. I drove straight from the hospital to the office. Daniel was there, leaning against my desk like nothing had happened, scrolling through his phone, coffee in hand. Hey, he said, smiling. Did Mom settle down? I stared at him for a long second. You sold the company, I said. He didn't deny it, didn't even look surprised. Yeah, he shrugged, it was time. I asked him why I wasn't told. He sighed, actually sighed, as if I were the inconvenience. Claire, he said, lowering his voice, you're too emotional right now. This was a business decision. That word, emotional, hit harder than the betrayal itself. I ran this place. I built the systems. I kept it alive. And you did a great job, he replied. But this needed vision, timing. Timing? I thought of my mother's pale face under hospital lights, the IV taped to her arm, the way she squeezed my hand like she was afraid to let go. You used the one moment I wasn't watching, I said quietly. He crossed his arms. You're overreacting. You'll get your share eventually. Eventually. Like I was a liability to be managed, a problem to delay. That was when I understood the truth I'd been avoiding for years. Daniel didn't see me as a partner. He saw me as infrastructure, something solid and silent, something that held weight but didn't get a vote. The anger didn't come as an explosion. It came as clarity, cold, focused, sharp enough to cut through every excuse I'd ever made for him. This wasn't family conflict. This was exploitation, wrapped in familiarity, justified by blood, and executed the moment he thought I was weakest. And for the first time, I stopped asking why he did it and started asking why I ever thought he wouldn't. After I left the office, I didn't go home. I drove without a destination, letting the highway decide where I ended up. The city blurred past my windshield, gas stations, fast food signs, neighborhoods I'd driven through 100 times without ever really seeing. I turned the radio on, then off. Everything felt too loud and completely silent at the same time. I wasn't crying. That surprised me. I kept waiting for the breakdown, the kind you see in movies where someone pulls over and screams into the steering wheel, but it never came. Instead, there was this hollow space in my chest, like something essential had been scooped out and left behind. I pulled into an empty parking lot behind a closed grocery store and sat there with the engine running. That was when it hit me. I hadn't just lost the company. I hadn't just been betrayed by my brother. I had lost the story I'd been telling myself for years, that if I carried enough weight, I'd earn protection, that if I stayed loyal long enough, loyalty would find its way back to me. I thought of all the nights I'd gone home exhausted, telling myself it would be worth it. that someday we'd stand side by side and say, "We built this together." Now I understood something I didn't want to admit. I'd been building it alone, and the moment I stopped holding it up, someone else stepped in to take it from me. When I finally went home, the apartment felt wrong. Too quiet, too clean. I dropped my keys on the counter and stood there, staring at the wall, unable to decide what to do next. There was no plan, no next step, just the heavy realization that everything I'd organized my life around, work, family, responsibility, had collapsed into a single unanswered question. If the people I trusted most could do this to me, what was I supposed to believe in now? I lay down on the couch, fully dressed, and stared at the ceiling. Hours passed. I didn't check my phone, didn't replay the conversation, didn't imagine what I should have said. There was no energy left for regret, only exhaustion, the kind that sinks past your muscles and settles somewhere deeper, where hope used to live. That night, I slept without dreams, and when I woke up the next morning, the world was still there, but the version of me who thought endurance guaranteed safety was gone. The shift didn't happen all at once. There was no dramatic morning where I woke up feeling empowered, no speech in the mirror, no sudden clarity delivered like a movie montage. What I felt instead was something quieter, stillness. I made coffee the next morning the same way I always had, stood at the counter, watched the steam rise, let my thoughts line up instead of crash into each other. For the first time since everything happened, I wasn't asking why. I was asking what now. I didn't call Daniel. I didn't confront him again. I didn't argue or explain or demand closure. I called a lawyer. Not to fix things, not to negotiate peace, to understand exactly where I stood. I brought documents, emails, old operating agreements I'd saved out of habit, not suspicion. We sat in a quiet office while she flipped through the paperwork, occasionally pausing, marking something with a yellow tab. Finally, she looked up at me. "Claire," she said carefully, "this wasn't impulsive. Your brother structured this so he wouldn't need your consent." Hearing it stated so plainly did something strange to me. It didn't hurt, it clarified. Because once you understand the truth, you stop wasting energy arguing with the version you wished was real. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't storm anywhere, I didn't post cryptic messages or recruit allies. I did something much less satisfying to watch and much more effective. I stopped participating. I told the lawyer all communication would go through her. I removed myself from internal access. I documented everything I had handled for years and handed it over, clean and complete. No chaos, no sabotage, no revenge, just boundaries. Daniel called me that afternoon. I let it go to voicemail. He texted. I didn't respond. He showed up at my apartment that evening. I didn't open the door. For years, I'd confused access with love, availability with loyalty. Now I understood something critical. Boundaries aren't punishment. They're information. They tell people what they can no longer take from you. And the moment I stopped trying to be understood, something inside me steadied. I wasn't healed. I wasn't okay. But I was clear. And clarity, I learned, is the first form of power you get back. I didn't do anything dramatic. I didn't call investors to warn them. I didn't sabotage operations. I didn't whisper my side of the story into the right ears. I simply stopped covering for him. For years, I'd been the quiet buffer, the one who smoothed delays, rewrote timelines, fixed errors before anyone noticed. When questions came in, I answered them. When mistakes happened, I absorbed them. When I stepped away, that buffer disappeared, and things unraveled faster than I expected. The investors started asking for reports Daniel couldn't produce. Clients asked questions he couldn't answer. Deadlines slipped without anyone quietly fixing them overnight. Within weeks, the tone changed. What had once been visionary leadership started to sound like excuses. What had been confidence began to look like avoidance. I heard about it secondhand, From people who used to call me after hours, now calling the lawyer instead. From vendors who suddenly realized I wasn't CC'd anymore and wondered why. The deal didn't collapse all at once. It stalled. Then it strained. Then it cracked. An internal review turned into a forensic one. Numbers that had always been handled were suddenly visible. Decisions that relied on my silent follow-through had no legs without it. Daniel tried to reach me again. This time, the messages were different. Not defensive, not dismissive. Urgent. He said things like, "We need to talk. This is getting complicated. You know how this works. Help me straighten it out." Help me. That word landed differently now. For years, it had been my role by default. Now, it was a request I could decline, and I did. Not with anger, not with satisfaction, with neutrality. Because here's the truth no one likes to admit. I didn't enjoy watching him struggle. What I felt was something quieter and far more relieving. I felt released. Released from being the invisible support system, released from managing someone else's risk, released from the unspoken expectation that I would always step in. The consequences weren't something I delivered, they were something I allowed, and that made all the difference. Life didn't suddenly become perfect after that. There was no triumphant ending where everything snapped into place and the pain evaporated. What came instead was something quieter. Space. The kind of space you don't realize you've been missing until it finally exists. I moved out of the routines that had defined me for years. Not dramatically, not all at once. I found a smaller place on the other side of the city. Nothing fancy, just clean, bright, and mine. No memories baked into the walls, no inherited expectations waiting for me when I unlocked the door. For the first few weeks, the silence felt unfamiliar, almost suspicious. No late-night calls, no crises to manage, no one leaning on me without asking. I started noticing how much energy I had been spending just staying upright for other people. I slept better. I ate when I was hungry, not when my schedule allowed. I went for walks without checking my phone every 5 minutes, waiting for someone else's problem to appear. And slowly, something softened inside me. Not forgiveness, understanding. I realized that betrayal doesn't always come from hatred. Sometimes it comes from entitlement, from people who grow so used to your strength that they stop seeing your humanity. Daniel eventually stopped trying to reach me. I heard through extended family that he told people I had changed, that I'd become cold, difficult, unrecognizable. What no one ever said out loud, but everyone seemed to understand, was this: I hadn't changed. I had stopped bending. I had stopped absorbing damage so someone else could stay comfortable. And that, I learned, will always feel like cruelty to the person who benefited from your silence. A few months later, someone asked me if I missed him, my brother, my old life, the business we were supposed to share. I thought about it honestly before answering. I miss who I thought he was, I said, but I don't miss what it cost me to believe that. That answer surprised even me, because it was true. What I gained wasn't revenge. It wasn't closure in the cinematic sense. It was something much steadier. Agency, the ability to choose myself without apology. If there's one thing I want you to take from my story, it's this: family betrayal isn't about punishment, it's about permission. Permission to stop explaining, permission to stop carrying what was never meant to be yours alone, permission to believe that peace is not selfish, even when it disappoints people who expected unlimited access to you. If you've ever been in that place, standing between loyalty and self-respect, I see you, and I hope you choose yourself. Because sometimes the most powerful ending isn't winning, it's walking away whole.